might be. We'll see after this.
Let's go get him. Let's go get him today, man. Let's go. Hey, dominate on three. 1, 2, 3. Dominate.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the show. And we've got a fun one today because Suneil's back on, which means it's always going to be the energy today.
You know it, baby. It's just some off season right before the draft. Stuff starting to heat up. Free agency still out there, and some big names still yet to be placed, man. It was interesting, Ron. I was looking at like some of the running backs, even though I know, the 49ers aren't in the market for a running back, but some pretty big names, man. Leonard Fournette, Ezekiel Elliott, I was just like, wow, Jerick McKinnon I was like, wow, there's a lot of big name running
Jerick
backs.
McKinnon back on the 49ers. I want Jerick McKinnon.
Yeah, I mean, look, he has a ring now, so he'd be having that Super Bowl pedigree, right? But yeah, it's interesting how many big names are out there right now.
I mean, I agree, and we were just talking before the show. Really, it's interesting about the amount of big names because when you see the amount of deals happen early on in free agency, you talk about, well, guess what? Where's the remainder of the cap going to go? Or where are these players going to go if the cap continues to decrease? Like analysts say it, I believe it. When the first 2 days are the most important days. If you don't have a deal then, your chances of getting a big deal get slimmer and slimmer. I mean, at this point, a lot of people have to resort to 1-year deals and bet on themselves and hope they get a deal next offseason because if you're getting a multi-year deal, it's likely for cheaper than you want, and so that's something that is unfortunate. I mean, we just saw Chauncey Gardner-Johnson get a 1-year deal, I think worth up to $8 million, when it was reported that he could have had a multi-year deal with the Philadelphia Eagles. So there are things like that where you essentially have to bet on yourself with an incentive-based deal. It's unfortunate for some of these top free agents.
Yeah, and I mean, you get closer and closer to the draft, all of a sudden teams' minds shift from, hey, let's solve this problem through free agency to let's solve this problem through the draft. So once again, another factor to make the market go down. And I mean, I've been interested to see how many 1-year deals have actually been out there, Rohan. I wonder if it plays a role because not only from the team's perspective, actually, I think the teams would more likely want multi-year deals now because the cap is about to jump so much. I wonder if some players are more open to 1-year deals because next year's cap is supposed to be so much higher. I would assume contracts are going to be bigger next year than they are this year, but we'll find out.
I agree. And the one thing you talk about the deals from this year to next year, teams likely do want multi-year deals, especially later on the road. It's just you do have to resort to the 1-year deals because players don't want more than multi-year deals, understanding that a 2-year deal worth $12 million, you could get that, or a 1-year deal worth up to $8 million, because understanding you could get 2 to 12, but you could also get 1 to 8, and then that those $4 million you're betting on yourself that you can make more than that next year.
Absolutely. It's intriguing, man. This time of year is pretty exciting, but we could talk about it for hours, bro. Let's get into the show.
Yeah, I mean, let's get into it. I mean, we'll start in a way right there with the big name free agents. You talk about some of the guys, and I hinted at it, is an under the radar move on the way, and I'm talking about players like Yannick Ngakoue at the edge position. Yannick Ngakoue is still out there. The 49ers could look to get a speed edge rusher to complement Nick Bosa. Ngakoue fits the mold. I think it's 8 sacks in every year of his career over the last 9 years or something like that. He's been talented. What do you think about the move? Do you think the 49ers can get it done? Do you think it's realistic? What do you think about Yannick Ngakoue?
Yeah, so I mean, I think in a perfect world, I think the 49ers early on were extremely interested in, Yannick Ngakoue. And, there's been, rumors around, some of the people that we know that are very tapped in that they extended a contract offer to him and he didn't choose to take it, right? Or he wanted to kind of weigh his options and whatnot. Then the 49ers went off and, they made some signings all along the defensive line. and some guys that could actually play edge. And then also we have to, take into consideration that Drake Jackson is there, right? And usually the second year is when the 49ers give a player a lot more reps, and they tend to kind of redshirt, play here spotty, and then develop them. And year two is usually when these guys take their leap. So getting a guy like Yannick Ngakwe, that probably takes away from Drake Jackson. And I wonder if some of the mentality there is shifting for the 49ers, where they're looking at, okay, well, we can't keep waiting to see if this guy's here, which I think Yannick Ngakwe, along with, Hargrave, Armstead, and Bosa, obviously, would be lights out as far as a defensive line. Man, you got four guys that are three down players, which is what,
Right.
both of us were talking about the 49ers should have, that could play, the run and the pass. And then, you could ease in Drake Jackson, give him another year of just, kind of heavier in the rotation, but not necessarily need to depend on him for everything. But as I would say on one end, it seems less and less likely, because the 49ers seem to have filled those roles with these 1 year deals. But then again, you mentioned it. If the price goes down and you end up being able to get Yannick on a 1 year, very, very team friendly deal, how would they say no? Right? Like, if you could
Hmm.
get him for like 1 year, 5 mil, 6 mil, something like that, I think the 49ers would do it. But I think at this point, they probably aren't willing to pay him what they were willing to pay him at the beginning of free agency. Let's just put it that way.
Right, right, and I think that it's true. Ngakwe is an interesting case because he's younger than some of the other guys, and he's about to enter his prime pretty much, right? He's only 27 years old, so I'd assume he himself wanted a shorter term deal heading into free agency. Teams might have wanted a 4 year deal. Ngakwe might have wanted 2 or 3 years so he can cash in again. And at this point, yeah, I think a 1 year deal is in the interest of Ngakwe, and I mean, the 1 year deal itself, you put yourself in the best position. I don't know if there's a better position out there than the 49ers, right? With their defensive line. I mean, obviously, a lot of strong defensive lines out there. The Eagles have been one last year and teams like that. But the 49ers, they've shown an interest, and they could be a team in the Ngakwe kind of mix as well.
It'd be interesting though, Rohan, and you're somebody that I would love to ask this question to. What can the 49ers afford, right? What I know there was a number come out that the 49ers are one of the lower teams as far as cap space and availability. Obviously, I know they could maneuver and free up some cap space. There's some players there that they could work with as far as restructuring or extending to save some cap money. But also, you have to take into consideration the rookie class. So where are the 49ers as far as cap? And what would they have to do to make available money to get maybe a player like Yannick Ngakoue, or would they be able to do it where they stand right now?
Right. I mean, the 49ers, when you look at it, I believe they're around $6.4 million, one of the lower teams in terms of cap space. When you account for the moves recently, where details have recently come out, $6.4 million, not too much, but the 49ers have gone about this offseason very uh, interestingly, in that I think they're more methodical here. They understand the value of restructuring contracts. They understand the value of creating cap space, but there's also the value of ensuring that you have the most flexibility in your future. And there's no need to restructure a deal unless you have a deal in place that forces you to make that restructure. When San Francisco looks to sign another player, if they do a big name player like an Ngakwe, I would envision them going after, going to one of the two moves that they can do, which is restructuring Christian McCaffrey and extending Nick Bosa. I think McCaffrey restructure comes earlier, but that could free up around $8 to $10 million because you just give McCaffrey the what do you call it? Maybe McCaffrey's cap hit could be around 3 million this year, and his you could restructure it or you could re-extend him, or whatever the logic is. You can move that money because McCaffrey is owed $12 million this year, and none of it is guaranteed. So you essentially make that money guaranteed, and I think that that could benefit McCaffrey. And so I think that there are certainly different ways that you can maneuver around with McCaffrey's deal. I think that that could work for the 49ers should they choose to go that route. But again, I think they're waiting to see if they lock down a free agent based on that they'd make a corresponding move. So while the 6 million number is a little unfortunate, I do think that there are still moves to be made where they could create more cap space.
And they would have to regardless, right, Rohan, just to be able to sign their rookie class? Because
That
isn't six
yes,
million not enough to sign if they, decide to sign every single player that they draft?
yes. For that number, I would not be too worried. Nick Bosa's extension should come before training camp, and the 49ers have until training camp to sign their entire rookie class. So I would not be worried about that portion of this deal. Because Nick Bosa should create at least 11 million in cap space with himself, given that his cap hit right now is around 17 million. Not 11 million. Get them to 11 million, create at least 5 million in cap space, which allows them to sign their rookie class.
Perfect. How do you feel like the 49ers have done as far as managing uh, not only the cap this year, but also for future years? One, I think a lot of people felt like there was going to be a lot more restructured contracts, but they didn't end up doing too much of that. So they're deciding to kind of just foot the bill and pay the guys the contracts and stuff like that, not pushing things to the end. How do you feel about the team that they put together with what they've done as far as cap maneuvering as well?
I think they've done a good job, but I think that there's also I think that that's this year. I think that you don't want to make a move when the move is not necessary. I think that that's something you've learned. I don't think you want to make that move unless you really absolutely have to. And when you talk about that, for me, 49ers haven't made that move unless it was necessary. Didn't mind Fred Warner being restructured. Who's the other restructure? Oh, Charvarius Ward. Did not mind that restructure. I thought that those two were going to happen. I think Christian McCaffrey's is going to happen, and then the Nick Bosa extension is going to happen as well. So I think there's certainly different ways that the 49ers can create. I like the ways that they've done it so far. As for the cap space for the future, I think next year is really the big year because the 49ers right now have about 18, $19 million in cap space for next year, but they have a lot of decisions because, first of all, Nick Bosa is going to have a cap hit next year that should exceed what he currently has, which I don't think is any money. Brandon Ayuk gets an extension next year. A lot of players are at the top of their cap hits. Trent Williams makes 28 million next year. Armstead makes about 25.8 million. Kittle makes around 20 million. Fred Warner makes 24 or 25 million. Debo Samuel makes 28.5 million. Hargrave himself will make 15.5 million, and then Travarius Ward makes around 18 million. A lot of players are at the peak of their contracts next year, which means you might see one or more bigger moves made from one of the star players, potentially like a guy like Debo Samuel, who where you can save uh well, if you designate it post June 1st, I think you can save a good amount of money. With Debo Samuel, I think you can save, forget exactly how much money it is, maybe around 20 million, I think you can do. Or Ark Armstead, if you move him pre June 1st, you can save around 11.5 million. So you might need to make one of those type of moves.
Very, very interesting.
Yeah, I mean it's a lot of cap situation to definitely go for. But the 49ers right now, their goal going forward with it this year. I think that that's the one thing they've made clear, and there's a reason. I mean, the odds reflect it. They're second best right now in the NFL behind the Chiefs to win the Super Bowl next year, despite the quarterback controversy and the unknown uncertainties there.
Yeah, and we should touch on the quarterback because there were some interesting reports that have been coming out, and we haven't gotten a chance to talk about it. The two things were,
Let's
you
do it.
know, Philip Rivers and most recently Ben Roethlisberger, both coming out in different ways, talking about when the 49ers, when Jimmy went down, that the 49ers reached out to, Ben Roethlisberger is the most recent, saying that they were gauging his interest as far as whether he was still out there looking to play. And, I think they did similar thing with Philip Rivers. What were your thoughts when you heard that, as far as that the 49ers were interested in one of these retired veteran quarterbacks to see if they would want to come back?
I think that overall, I'm not too surprised because at that point, you didn't really know. at all what Brock Purdy would be. I think it shows what many people anticipated, which is the 49ers essentially thought their season was over at that point, when Jimmy Garoppolo broke his foot. Understanding Brock Purdy did well, but they also placed the calls after that first game of Brock Purdy, thinking, they may need to do something else. And so, um, I wouldn't say I was too surprised. I think it's interesting that the information's coming to light now, obviously, given how the season went with Brock Purdy, and that he's seen by some as the franchise quarterback for the 49ers. So I think that that's kind of the more intriguing part. But not too surprised at the actual information that Brock Purdy was the guy.
What's interesting to me is just how under wraps it was. That
Right,
the
right.
49ers kept it a secret. So
That's
to
crazy.
me,
Like, it took both players having, like, I think they were both on podcasts for them to kind of
yeah,
for
they
them
brought
to
it up.
reveal it.
It never came
Yeah.
from the team, and that's interesting to me because a lot of times, especially with the faithful and 49ers Twitter and all this kind of stuff, people bring up, this person, Kyle Shanahan feels this way, John Lynch feels this way, and all of these reporters are coming out and saying, sources say this and sources say that. Like, the 49ers are a steel trap when it comes to the messaging that comes out of there. If there's a message that's true, it's because they want that out there. But as far as what the intricacies and what the 49ers are actually thinking,
Mhm.
nobody knows other than the people within those walls. If you could keep this such a secret that, you reached out to these, Hall of Famers, right? And Philip Rivers and Ben Roethlisberger, and not one peep throughout the season, to me, that proves to me that, like, anybody that feels like they have this kind of like sense of what the 49ers are trying to do at quarterback, y'all don't know anything. You know what I mean? Unless it comes out of
Yeah.
Shanahan's mouth directly, I don't believe it.
And I mean, it's good. I'm glad it didn't work out because I mean, overall, the 49ers think we're better off. I think at their stage in their careers, I don't know, maybe not Phil Rivers, but I mean, in general, I think there's at that stage in their careers, I don't know if either of them are an upgrade over what Brock Purdy showed in the flashes last
Sure.
year.
And the excitement of what Brock Purdy brought to the team, and the longevity of the 49ers window is a lot more safe with a guy like Brock Purdy and a guy like Trey Lance, right? Because they're both young,
Right.
inexpensive at this point with a lot of upside. So whomever ends up becoming, the leader in the locker room or the franchise quarterback, that's both better off than, guys that are past their prime, just, not, you know, gonna be more expensive, and you can't build around for the future.
Yeah, no, I do agree with that sentiment there. And I mean, overall, I think the 49ers now have obviously that conundrum on their hands. And it showed to them, I think, a little bit that they could win with a cheap option at quarterback, with a rookie quarterback, with a younger quarterback, which other teams have showcased the ability to do when building a team around those players.
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting though, but Rohan, because for me, there is the one quarterback that's out there that I think would be perfect for Kyle Shanahan, and that is the man out of Baltimore that still hasn't signed a deal with his team, and hasn't signed an extension, hasn't signed an offer with anybody.
Right.
So I know that, Lamar Jackson obviously would be a pipe dream for the 49ers. However, things are playing out to where it could possibly be the 49ers, because look, the way that I look at it, Rohan, and obviously the money, all that kind of stuff is your wheelhouse more than that. So you could probably just shut down my dreams by saying, dude, financially this is impossible. However, you look at what would cause the 49ers not to be in the running. Well, the main thing was they don't have a first round draft pick, right? So the teams that have a first round draft pick can actually negotiate with the team, as far as have like kind of first dibs, because you can outbid other teams as far as the package, or get the 2 first round picks, whatever the case may be. But
Yeah.
now that there's less and less teams, and it doesn't seem like teams are offering, and who knows who's talking to who on behalf of uh, Lamar Jackson, right? There was a memo that came out from the NFL saying there's a certain person that's supposedly tied to Lamar Jackson that is trying to negotiate deals for him and not to talk to him, or whatever the case may be. Way more confusing than I could understand. But if there is no resolution in the next few weeks, right, where the draft is starting to happen, now all of a sudden the 49ers can come back into it, right? Because at that point, it's past the draft. Now you can just, negotiate based off of compensation and future picks, which the 49ers do have. So to me, how realistic, or let's say before realistically, let's have a pipe dream because I don't want you to shut down my dream quite yet. How good of a fit do you think Lamar Jackson would be under Kyle Shanahan with the 49ers?
Oh, without a doubt, it'd be phenomenal. I mean, seeing Lamar Jackson in a 49ers uniform, if you're only giving up 2 first-round picks especially, puts the 49ers as the best team they're going to the 49ers would be the best team in the NFL. They're going to win the Super Bowl if Lamar Jackson is their quarterback under Kyle Shanahan, because Kyle Shanahan has talked about the quarterback he wants, and he has name dropped Lamar Jackson as a comparison to one of the quarterbacks that he wants. Lamar
Right.
Jackson would be great in this offense because people underrate his passing, and Kyle Shanahan wants a guy with a strong arm. He's got a strong arm. I mean, he's got a strong arm. He can do all the zone read stuff Kyle Shanahan wants. He's got the smarts for it. And I mean, him with these weapons, he's never been with, let alone one of these level of weapons. Now you're gonna, I mean, all credit to Mark Andrews. I'm talking about receivers, but now you got Debo and Brandon Ayuk. I think that Lamar Jackson would fit very well, especially understanding that he's come from a power run system before, and the 49ers have some of that element in their offense as well.
Not to mention the level of running backs he's going to be working with as well, right? He's
Oh
had,
yeah,
some running backs that have been good, but I don't think anybody with the talent of CMC, Elijah Mitchell, obviously as well. And you mentioned, the offensive weapons, but also the play caller, right? He's, going from a guy like Greg Roman to a guy like Kyle Shanahan. That's like night and day, right? So definitely, I think people don't realize how perfect Lamar Jackson would actually be for this offense, because he does obviously have the strong arm, but he's very accurate, man. He's up there close to 70% completion, and all of this yak stuff. He's right there as far as being able to put the ball where these players would need it to be able to still keep the yak going on. Plus, you
right.
have a deep game as well, which would open up, for guys like Ayuk, guys like Danny Gray. It would be awesome. Now, reality, financially, is there a way? Let's say the deal has to be a 3-year deal, 50 mil a year. He has come out and said that he doesn't need a fully guaranteed deal. But let's just say APY, they want it to be around 50 million. Could they swing that some way with, how would they make that fit? Is there a way to make that fit at all?
I think it's tough financially. I think the bigger question to me is Baltimore's going to match the deal. I think Baltimore matches that deal. Lamar Jackson has openly come out and said Baltimore offered him 3 years, 133 million fully guaranteed, and he declined it. To me, that is a phenomenal deal. That is a really damn good deal. I understand Deshaun Watson's deal, but to get that in today's quarterback market is really good because it puts Lamar Jackson back on the market when he's like 28 years old, assuming you obviously have a no tag clause and stuff. Well,
Mm-hmm.
I think it puts him on the market when he can get another big contract, and all of that money is fully guaranteed. I think that that's the big thing. To me, I think Baltimore will match. Overall, I've said it since the day that Lamar Jackson's news came out. I think this is all a tactic by Baltimore to eventually have him return to Baltimore. I think they're allowing him to test his market, understanding that the remainder of the league views Lamar Jackson in the same way that they do, which is a damn good quarterback, but they're not going to risk the fully guaranteed contract part of it. And also the issue with this situation is Lamar Jackson, when you talk about him, he is a guy who is going to obviously it requires this like 5-day period, right? When you talk about it, a 5-day period about uh where you once you sign a tender for Lamar Jackson, they get 5 days to match. No
Mm-hmm.
team was going to do that in the beginning of free agency because it essentially says if you sign that tender, you're not going to be a part of free agency. And then at this point, there aren't many teams that can construct a deal where I think the Ravens won't match. The Atlanta Falcons were the number one clear cut team. I
Right.
think that they're out of the loop. I know a lot of
Well,
people are pointing to the 2 first-round pick idea. I think the Ravens still match it, though. I think that if you give them a deal, I think they're going to match it. That's just the way that I think.
well, it depends on where the uh where the relationship is there, right? So, possibly it could be soured where Lamar Jackson's just like, nah, I don't want to play here anymore. I want to force a trade out or whatever the case may be. But let's just say, financially, could the 49ers do? Let's just say it's a 3-year, 150 fully guaranteed contract. What would that mean for the 49ers?
Super Bowl contender. They're the number 1
Well,
Super
as
Bowl
far as
contender.
let's talk, obviously we
Oh,
know
financially?
financially, yeah. Who would they have to start losing players? Like, what would that do to the overall roster? How would they be able to make that fit? All that kind of stuff.
The biggest question still, I think, in my opinion, is next year. I mean, this year is also really crazy because when you talk about fully guaranteed, there is no structuring of that deal. You
Right.
have to pay all of the money. Like
Uh-huh.
the way that a lot of teams do it nowadays is they inflate the AAV by backloading these contracts, but these players won't see the last year or 2 years of their deal. Tyreek Hill last year got 4 years, $120 million, but it's really a 3-year deal worth $75 million. His cap hit in year 4 of that extension is $59 million. He's not going to see a single penny of that money. He's instead that contract will either get restructured or redone because they'll change the contract terms or he'll get cut or whatever it may be. He's not going to see a penny of that $59 million. However, in Lamar Jackson's case, well, I'll start with Deshaun Watson because he's a part of this. He got restructured. His cap hit for the next 3 years is like 66 million. But the difference is they have to pay the 66 million a year in terms of cap hit. And
Right.
so the toughness part for the 49ers, they're at 6 million right now. So let's say you even backload the deal. Next year, you're already only at $19 million in cap space, and it's tough to move off that deal. It's tough for the 49ers to kind of continue forward and kind of get off like other contracts. You're going to have to move a lot of money and not be able to re-sign some guys. I think if you sign Lamar Jackson, it makes re-signing Nick Bosa extremely tough in terms of the cap, in terms of how you maneuver there. And even if you re-sign Nick Bosa, you lose a couple of marquee players when you don't re-sign Lamar Jackson.
Yeah. And then it just comes to a point where it's like, well, look, we've seen in Kansas City when you have a high level caliber quarterback that you could depend on week after week after week, that it doesn't really matter who you put around him, right? Like
Right.
Kansas City roster wasn't, if you look just on paper, nobody was afraid of that roster other than maybe 2 players on offense, which were Patrick Mahomes and Kelsey. And, obviously they have some weapons on that defensive line, but overall, if you have that quarterback position solved and elite, the roster around them doesn't have to be as elite, right? Right now, the
Right.
49ers have been dealing with putting together an extremely elite roster because they haven't had that solution at quarterback with Jimmy, with, Trey being in and out due to injuries, with Purdy. So having an elite roster was extremely important. Well, if they get the elite quarterback, maybe they don't need to have the elite roster as much, and they could focus on some of the other talents that they have. And one of the reasons why I think it would work, Rohan, and I'm talking long term as well, even with the money and losing guys and stuff like that, I would put 49ers as one of the top 5 drafting teams in the league. And I think that's something that is extremely important when you play the cap situation, is if you could get draft and hit on draft picks like the 49ers are able to do in the 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th round, where you're paying pretty much pennies in comparison to NFL contracts, but getting extremely productive players out of it. We're talking about bona fide starters, right? They just got an all-pro out of Hufanga. Diamador Lenore, that's looking like, a bona fide starter. You're talking about a couple guys on the offensive line that are already, Aaron Banks, that looks like he's going to be, left guard there for a decade. Spencer Burford, who, played up and down last year, but you expect him to take another leap, like the linebackers that they developed, obviously all of these guys. So to me, when you have a front office that's able to draft as well as the 49ers are able to draft, you can be able to still keep elite players around a really, really bona fide star at quarterback. Um, it's just we haven't seen the 49ers and Kyle Shanahan specifically figure that part out, right? It's been mediocre
Right.
or just decent quarterback play and then an elite roster around it. It hasn't produced a Super Bowl quite yet. Maybe you do the elite quarterback and then figure out how to piece together a roster around them. Maybe that might be the route to go. So that's why, I'm kind of for it to go out and make the move if they can make the move, because I think all of a sudden the 49ers are contenders for a long, long time.
Yeah, I think I agree. There.
Ooh, I like it. What do you think? What do you think the draft compensation would have to be?
For Lamar Jackson,
Yeah.
if let's say the Ravens don't match and they want, uh, it easily starts with 2 1s. I mean, I honestly, I think they throw Bosa in there. I think you throw
Well,
Bosa in there. I think it would be, I maybe Bosa compensates for the 2 1s. Maybe Bosa and a 1. Like I know Jesse threw out the Bosa 1 and Trey Lance. I think that
yeah.
that's a fair competition.
Yeah. And I would do it.
I would. I would. That's
I
the
would do
crazy part. I would.
it.
And I mean, if you think about it that way, I think it's a little different. Like obviously Lamar Jackson's going to cost more and also could be fully guaranteed. But if you think about it that way, um, you're essentially swapping Bosa's money for Lamar's money, right? And so if it's a 5-year deal, maybe 5-year deal where 200 million, let's just say it's the similar deal to what Lamar got in that it was like a 3-year deal or 4-year deal where you get the 40 million guaranteed for the first 3 years and then how much ever guaranteed it was in total. I mean, you still got to figure out some cap there, but I think it could, maybe you could make it work in that situation.
Yeah, and I mean, another thing that's thrown in there that maybe people aren't realizing right away is, look, we just saw Daniel Jones, who I don't think necessarily is an elite quarterback by any stretch of the imagination, but he's
Correct.
getting paid what, like 35, 40 million a year, something like that. And he basically just, I think he gets that for taking a team to the playoffs. Well, I don't think anybody thinks that Brock Purdy or Trey Lance isn't going to be capable of taking this 49ers roster to a playoff, right? One of these guys is going to have to get paid the same way. So would you rather at the end of the day, when you're trading Trey Lance and Bosa and a first round pick for Lamar Jackson, not only are you swapping money for Bosa, but you're also swapping the Trey Lance money in the future that most likely would be anywhere from 35 to 40 million just because he plays the position that's going to get paid that way. It's not like you're going to re-sign Trey Lance for 25 million. Like, it wouldn't be possible. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know. And I mean, obviously Trey Lance or Brock Purdy, whoever it might be, if they get an extension, that obviously that talk comes in 2 years. But a lot of interesting quarterback talk. I mean, obviously this Lamar situation is a little far fetched in my opinion for the 49ers sake, but it's a fun discourse nonetheless. Just to think about the possibilities of it, think about the contract, think about what could be compensation and what Lamar could bring to the 49ers, because that's the most important part.
Yeah, I mean, it's far fetched, but it just depends. Because what is the one thing that you've been saying about this off season? What has been kind of the messaging based off of the moves? You said that the 49ers are what this season?
Like, what do you mean?
You said
Oh,
that based off of the moves, based off of the way that they're, signing these players, they're all in, right? They're
yeah,
all in.
for the
Like,
most
it's
part.
like time to win a Super Bowl. So if you look at it and you're like, all right, well, what will take us over the hump? Well, a guy like Lamar Jackson definitely makes it easier to win a Super Bowl rather than harder. So if they're really truly all in, that might be the move that really pushes the needle and is like, look, we're getting it done this year with this guy. And we saw it, we've seen that happen. We see it Tampa Bay with Tom Brady. Obviously, they signed him in free agency, so it was a little bit different. But you saw the Rams with Matthew Stafford. They went out, made the trade, and were able to go win a Super Bowl that year. And the difference, once again, between the 49ers and doing that, because you look at the Rams and it looks like, man, they're dumpster fire now, but the Rams never drafted as well as the 49ers have. So that's the difference, where the 49ers have been able to get productive starters, very, very high end talent from late round picks, Rams couldn't say the same. So they always had to try to re-sign through free agency, give these big contracts, and that's why they ended up in the situation that they're in.
Right, exactly. Kind of moving forward a little bit, we talked about Lamar Jackson, we talked about Yannick Ngakoue, the moves potentially happening and things like that. About the 49ers, let's go position by position. Let's see. Are they better or are they not? Because I think that that's a cool exercise to do right now. 49ers have gone through brunt of free agency. I still expect a couple of free agents for them to sign, but for the most part, this is how their roster looks free agency wise. We can talk about are they better, are they not, and are they done at the position? Let's start with quarterback. 49ers signed Sam Darnold, lost Jimmy Garoppolo, have Brock Purdy and Trey Lance in the room. What do you think about the room? Do you think that there's more to happen? How do you like the room at the moment?
So I would say that they're better. And the only reason why I'm saying that they're better is because 1 year more experience for Purdy, 1 year more experience for Trey. And I think Sam Darnold as a third option is better than Josh Johnson. And similar to, I think you could get the same kind of play out of him than you can out of Jimmy Garoppolo. So for me, it's pretty much the same room but younger, more athletic, and the young guys that have been playing really well, at least in Purdy, a year older kind of thing. The only thing that I guess is the question mark is, everybody's kind of coming off of an injury other than Sam Darnold. But let's be honest, last year, everybody was coming off of an injury as well. So the injured 49ers having quarterbacks that are coming off of an injury is kind of a staple. I don't know when we've had healthy quarterbacks per se. So to me, I would say it's either the same, if not a little bit better, just based off of these guys having another year of NFL underneath their belt.
Yeah. To me, probably say it's a wash. Maybe worse. Probably say it's a wash. So I'll disagree here. I think Garoppolo is better than Sam Darnold. I think that, and I mean I think that the way where you could say it could be better. I mean the experience is interesting for sure, but at the moment I think both are unknowns. I don't know if Purdy's going to be better at the moment, just because he's coming off an injury. And there could be lingering soreness. We also don't know the timeline. So for that reason, I'd say it's a wash at the moment. I think Garoppolo is better. Lance could be better. Purdy could be better, but the unknowns to me keep it right now at a somewhat of a wash. But again, all you need is for one of these quarterbacks to develop. And
Mm-hmm.
if one of the quarterbacks develop, you have a Super Bowl caliber roster, and then you just need the quarterback to kind of put you over the top. As for the room itself, I think these are the three that you see on opening day. Those are your three top quarterbacks. They'll likely sign a quarterback being in the undrafted pool, or maybe draft one late round. That'll be your practice squad quarterback for the year, because the 49ers normally roll with three, not normally, but they did last year, three on the active roster, one on the practice squad. I think that that's what they'll end up doing. I think you can get one through the draft and then seek them through waivers. Not too strong of a quarterback class, so I think that that's possible. That's my anticipation at the moment.
Yeah, I agree. I think they definitely draft another quarterback. It's smart. I think every year you should draft a quarterback because you never know, especially with the 49ers. But more importantly, you hit on a guy like Brock Purdy. All of a sudden now you have leverage, when it comes to starting quarterbacks and who to pay and all that kind of stuff. So
Agreed. Agreed. Let's move on to running back, because not too much action here. Who do you got? You got Elijah Mitchell, Christian McCaffrey, Davis Price, and then Jordan Mason. Those are your
right.
four at the moment, it seems like, with Kyle Juszczyk. What do you think about this? Wash, better, worse?
Yeah, I would also have to go better. And once again, just health, right? Elijah Mitchell should be healthy starting the season. CMC with the full, 1 year pretty much under his belt with the team, you would think that he'd feel more comfortable and with the team as well. And also TDP, JP Mason, another year under their belt there. And they're obviously going to draft. We know that the 49ers draft running backs or sign running backs off of the undrafted market. So maybe another JP Mason comes up and TDP isn't on the team next year, like Trey Sermon wasn't. So I would say that they're better, and once again, not necessarily because they got more talented at the position. It's pretty much all the same players, but everybody should be healthy and a little bit more experienced and comfortable with the system. So I would say that makes it better overall.
Yeah, and to me, I will go with the same answer. but for somewhat of a different reason, specifically about Jordan Mason. 49ers, I think that they give him more opportunity. I think he's a little bit going to be better in pass protection. I think they give him more opportunity. Elijah Mitchell, I can't rely on his health at the moment just because that's how it's been for the last 2 years. Hope he comes back a little stronger because obviously when you're stronger, you can play faster, but also you can sustain more hits. That's what I'm hoping for Elijah Mitchell in what is this, year three? I'm really hoping he can kind of put it together in that regard. But Jordan Mason, I do expect to be better. And I think that that just propels the 49ers. Everybody else, I mean, Christian McCaffrey, we saw what he could do. I think that that continues to be there. Mitchell, when he's healthy, is elite. Not elite, but like, he's really good in the system.
Hmm.
Mason, I think, is valuable. And I mean, TDP can't be worse than he was last year. No disregard to him, but I think that Davis Price, I mean, with a year in the system, you either are the same that you were last year, which would be disappointing, or you're better with your vision and the way that he can make one cut and really hit the whole downhill.
Yeah, and I mean, if you're looking at TDP, you're starting to see that the running back position is starting to change. To get a second contract with the same team, pretty difficult. You're seeing some really good,
Right.
productive running backs that aren't getting that second deal because rookies are coming in and playing extremely well, right? So TDP has to see, hey, a guy like JP Mason wasn't drafted, got more run than I did, later on in the season. TDP's going into the year as the fourth option on the in that running back room, right? So he has to really step his game up to kind of earn playing time if he's even going to see the field, right?
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I think that uh it'll be interesting. I don't know if he really touches the field too much, right? I think the way that he does it is special teams, but Mason beat him out on special teams last year. Can he improve in that regard? I wonder if the 49ers pick up a running back to compete with TDP, undrafted, maybe late round, and take the best of the two. Because, I mean, if TDP shows he can't be the guy, 49ers show they don't mind cutting their losses. Trey
Yeah.
Sermon didn't pan out. They cut him after 1 year. TDP wouldn't be surprised if they do the same. Although, again, another waste of a third round pick there where there were options that could have helped them, not only then, but in the future on the board. Safety was the biggest one last year. Ended up not going that route.
Yeah, I'm good off of the 49ers drafting a running back in the third round. Like they should just not ever do that ever again.
Yeah, I don't care if like if there's a Saquon in the third round, man, if there's a Saquon in the third round, somehow the 49ers are not going to be able to have him pan out.
Exactly. Exactly.
Uh, Give me the sixth round though. Sixth round, draft a short 5'8", 135-pound guy. He'll pan out. I don't know how, but he'll
Yeah.
pan out.
Yeah, and you would think that the 49ers won't be as pressed at running back just because they finally have a solution there. Like CMC is somebody you could say this is our guy, and this is going to be a guy for the next couple of years. So I don't think they really have to press that running back button in the next couple drafts.
I agree. I agree. At wide receiver, what do you think? Better, worse? Not really many. I don't think a single addition or uh,
Or
a
change,
single
right?
loss. Yeah,
Yeah. Once again, I think that you would have to say better, and I think it's going to be two players, right? I think Brandon Ayuk and Danny Gray. Brandon Ayuk, this is going to be another year where he gets to kind of dictate his money. These next 2 years, right? He's playing for that extension and really showing consistency there. He had his career high last season, breaking 1,000 yards. I expect the same from him this year, especially if either quarterback, Trey Lance or Brock Purdy, for a full year. You would expect Brandon Ayuk to get more, I guess, more opportunities down the field, especially with Trey Lance there. So I would say that they're going to be better. Once again, not necessarily because the talent is upgraded, but the players that are there are going to be more comfortable with the system, and possibly the quarterback change.
I'll say the same. I'll say the same because I like your logic about how Danny Gray could become better, and I like the logic about how Brandon Ayuk could become better. But I think, in my opinion, if Gray is becoming better and you have the same five, one player is going to regress then because there's only so much playing time you can go around. And if Gray is going to sneak in, Does that mean a lesser role for McLeod after the year McLeod had with some nice gadget touches? Does it mean lesser role for Jawan Jennings after the blocking Jawan Jennings showed? That type of thing. I don't know if I expect Debo Samuel to have an improvement in after what he had last year. I think last year is kind of somewhat more of the norm with Debo Samuel. Really good all around player, not the best receiver overall. He's like he's an above average receiver, just not an elite receiver necessarily. Just a really elite gadget weapon, in my opinion. And so that's kind of the way that I'm looking at this situation. I think it's a wash.
Yeah, and I mean, you would hope that with the addition of CMC, for the full season, hopefully that would keep both of them healthier. I think
Right.
Debo and CMC, because they can definitely be utilized similarly in the offense. But the reason why I'm pretty adamant this receiving core is going to be better is, one, I think that the quarterback play is going to be better, regardless of if it's Lance or Purdy. And I also think that Brandon Ayuk's locked in, man. I really think we got one that is going to really break out and have even a bigger season than he had last season. And you like I said, year two of these receivers, that's when they get more opportunity. So Danny Gray is going to see the field more. We've seen, he obviously now has a year under his belt of what it takes to see playing time for the 49ers. You got to be able to block really, really well. And I'm sure he's going to get bigger, stronger, put the time in the weight room. So yeah, and I could see a guy like McLeod getting less an opportunity. I would see him as the odd man out and really just focus on him really solidifying special teams as far as punt returning and kick returns, because at the end of the day, we didn't necessarily get him for his receiving abilities. We got him for his special teams ability. So if he just focuses on that, I don't necessarily see that as a bad thing.
Yeah, I think that definitely is fair. And I mean, I think both ways work. I definitely think both ways work. Moving on to tight ends, a group that probably still requires one more addition. What do you think?
This one, I would have to say slightly lean worse, just because where I'm talking about experience for all those other players, all those other, I guess, groups, all those other groups had really, really young players. That's not the case for the tight ends for the
Hmm.
49ers. This is where one of the older groups, you brought back Dwelly. You obviously have Kittle there, and I think Warner's still there. These guys are been in the league for some time. So a year older for them actually might be negative versus positive, like we're saying for younger guys. So I think, I would give this an incomplete, because obviously the draft, I think, is going to be where they get their next tight end. So if they are able to get a guy and develop him like they were able to develop Kittle, obviously, this could change. But right now, I would have to hedge probably a little bit worse. Not necessarily that they're going to produce less, because Kittle could still have a huge, and probably will have a huge year. But as a group, I would say that they haven't gotten better.
Yeah, I think that I'll probably tend to agree at the moment. However, when it's all said and done, I think that they have the potential to be better because I do fully anticipate them going after a tight end in the draft. I think that that's going to be a priority for them, and so I think at the like when it's all said and done overall, I'll say it's a wash, just because I don't think any of the backups did anything spectacular last year. I don't think any of them really held too much. Now you could obviously say Kittle could be in for some regression. I think that that's fair because of his injury history primarily. And so I think you can make the argument. But overall, given how the backups really weren't too impactful last year, I think I'll go with a wash at the moment.
How when you say it's going to be a priority, could you see using one of their third round picks on a tight end?
Yeah, I could. I
Wow.
think that they could. Yeah. I think that they got to go BPA. Sorry, BPA. But I think that if tight end is really BPA, you go with it because the value is there. I don't anticipate them using the third rounder on a tight end just because I think this is a deep class and I think there will be BPA left better later on in the board to where you could see a fourth or a fifth being used on a tight end. But I wouldn't be surprised if the a third round pick is there, and I wouldn't mind it if it's the right player.
If you had to rank 49ers priorities right now, how would you rank them?
You see, it's tough because they don't really have too many priorities. I'd go right tackle. I think it's still the number one priority. I put safety up there because you want a guy for next year after Trishawn Gibson leaves. I would put um, maybe edge up there, not necessarily as a priority, but you might want to have another one to rotate in with Drake Jackson if you don't sign a guy. And then the position we're just talking about, I think that tight end. I think tight end probably goes over edge because you've wanted the number two for Kittle, and a lot of teams are placing a premium on backup tight ends. You see $7-8 million contracts per year go out to
Mm-hmm.
these guys to be the second tight end because when you have two tight ends on the field, especially guys that can do everything, guess what? It forces teams to place another linebacker on the field or another defensive lineman on the field. What does that mean? You have more cluttered boxes and you have more spread out defenses, which helps your spread offense.
Yeah, I agree with you in the exact same order. I think right tackle, safety, tight end, and then I would put edge and either linebacker or kicker would be
Yeah,
probably in that order.
yeah, that's fair. All right, defensive side of the ball, we start with defensive line.
Well,
You lose.
you missed the most important
Oh,
on the
offensive line.
offensive, bro.
Yeah.
The
Off.
offensive line, man. What do you think? Let's let you start.
Okay, I'll start. Offensive line, you lose Mike McGlinchey. You retain Jake Brendel. I think and then who yeah, those are the main moves. You retain Jake Brendel, you lose Mike McGlinchey. I'll probably say worse. Probably say worse. I
You
mean,
lose Brunskill as well.
you lose Brunskill. That's true. You lose Brunskill, who's a key
Bring in
reserve.
Feliciano.
Feliciano's there. I'll probably say worse. I think you can make the argument that Feliciano and Brunskill are similar, and then I think that we could make the argument also overall. Brunskill, Feliciano, similar. Mike McGlinchey, I think you can make the argument that obviously he's better than whoever his replacement will be in year one, at least, I think. And so because of that, they the 49ers do get worse at the position. Although you could make the argument for growth from Burford Banks that could ultimately outweigh the the change. But I'll go for worse at the moment.
So ultimately, it's really funny, Rohan, because you and I have always been kind of on the same page when it comes to Mike McGlinchey. You know, he is battered and bruised when it comes to the faithful, right? There's been, people are saying good riddance to him. He's terrible, one of the worst right tackles, all this kind of stuff. And you and me were like, dude, there's like not a better replacement out there in free agency. There's not a right tackle that's out there that's going to be better than Mike McGlinchey. And I think that we were vindicated when you look at the deal that Mike McGlinchey got. He's the highest paid, right? As
Right.
far as right tackle, he got the biggest deal. So yeah, I mean, for everything that people wanted to say negatively about Mike McGlinchey, he is one of the top right tackles in the league, and it's hard to replace that. However, I'm gonna say wash, and the reason why I'm gonna say wash is one of the things that I think that any offensive line truly is is needed is continuity. And remember, like last year, people were like, "This offensive line is going to be terrible." There's, four new starters along the offensive line. Um, the only person that's back is Trent Williams. McGlinchey's injured. We don't even know if he's going to be able to be healthy. Aaron Banks, nobody knows what he's capable of. Jake Brendel, he's never been a starter. And then, Daniel Brunskill at guard, and it ended up being Burford. Well, 80% of the offensive line is the same. And all that 80%, Rohan, is healthy. That's not the same as what we had last season. Last season,
That's fair.
we had a lot of injuries, a lot of new players, no continuity. And this ended up finishing as a top 10 offensive line.
Hmm.
So for me, the continuity of that 80% being there in left tackle, left guard, center, and right guard, that is an upgrade over what we had last year. So to me, I think that this offensive line is actually going to be better. And whether it's Tom Compton at right tackle, who has been in the system quite some time, is he as good as McGlinchey, one for one? I would say no. But is this unit going to be better? I would say yes, just because of the continuity. All of these guys are getting another year. They went to a deep playoff run together. Now they have another year of that continuity. Tom Compton isn't like a guy that isn't familiar with this team. You plug him right in there. He probably still has continuity with this team more than anybody else that they bring in because he's been part of this roster. So to me, I actually think this offensive line is going to be a little bit better, man, just because last year wasn't that the thing. Everybody said this offensive line is going to be trash because they had zero continuity. Now they have tons of continuity, and all of a sudden it's supposed to be worse. I just need consistency, Rohan. I just need consistency for the faithful. But I am Mr. Consistent. I say they're going to be actually a little bit better because of that continuity.
Fair, fair. I think that, I mean, I'll respect the take because you brought the argument with it, and that's what I like. I definitely like it. Guys, we are going to save defense actually for the next podcast. So stay tuned for the next podcast between me and Sunil. It's going to come soon. But any last thoughts, Sunil? Because this was a fun one, man. Fun one.
Yeah.
Love the breakdown.
Yeah, I'm excited. I do think overall, and overall that this free agency has been a win. I'm sure we'll talk about that,
Yeah.
later on once free agency is totally over. But I'm excited about the team, man. I still think we have one of the better squads, and it's going to be exciting for the rest of the offseason.
100%, 100%. But guys, thank you guys so much for tuning in. This was a fun episode. We'll be back very soon, and be sure to subscribe to Sunil as well. His channel obviously is growing as well, so make sure to subscribe to both. We'll see you guys next time.